Ladies and gentlemen, his silence is not empty, it's a message. Every unanswered call, every text left hanging, every moment of withdrawal is saying something louder than words ever could. You think he's forgotten you, but what if his silence is actually screaming your name? What if it's the space where his desire grows, where his fears battle his feelings, where his absence becomes the very proof of your power? Tonight, I'm going to show you why silence speaks volumes and how to turn it into the most powerful advantage you'll ever have in love. And when someone goes silent on you, it can feel like the loudest noise you've ever heard. You replay every moment, every conversation, every little detail, wondering what you missed. You sit there with the quiet buzzing in your chest, asking yourself why he pulled away, why he stopped calling, why the messages slowed down, why the energy shifted. But here's the truth most people forget. Silence is not nothing. Silence is communication. Silence is an answer. And sometimes silence is screaming your name louder than words ever could. And when a man goes quiet, it doesn't always mean he doesn't care. Sometimes it means he cares so much that he doesn't know how to show it. Sometimes it means he's battling his own fears, his own doubts, his own insecurities. And the safest thing for him is to step back rather than step forward. Sometimes it means he's testing the ground, seeing if you'll come chasing, if you'll fill the gap, if you'll take the silence as an invitation to pour more of yourself in while he gives less. His silence is information, and you have to decide what you're going to do with it. And what most people do is panic. They think, if I don't say something, I'll lose him. If I don't fix this, he'll disappear. So they send the long texts, they over-explain, they demand answers. But here's the problem. When you do that, you're not listening to the silence anymore. You're drowning it out with noise. You're trying to fill the void instead of asking why the void is there. That's where your power lies, because silence, when you're brave enough to sit with it, reveals the truth. And think about it. If someone really wants you, do they leave you guessing? Do they vanish without a word? Do they make you question your worth, your value, your place in their life? No. Someone who wants you makes it known. Someone who values you finds a way to show up, even in the busiest season, even in the hardest moment. So if his silence is filling the room right now, if his absence is louder than his presence, it's telling you something vital. Either he doesn't have the courage to meet you where you are, or he doesn't want to. Either way, that silence is not something you should be rushing to cover up. It's something you should be paying attention to. And the silence you feel is not just his. It's yours too. It's the part of you that already knows the truth, but is afraid to admit it. It's the part of you that senses the imbalance, the hesitation, the lack of clarity, but doesn't want to face what that means. It's the part of you that hopes he'll come back, hopes he'll explain, hopes he'll finally say the words you've been desperate to hear. But deep down, your silence is screaming too. It's telling you to stop chasing, stop begging, stop waiting for a breadcrumb trail that will never lead to a feast. And when you allow his silence to exist without running to fix it, you give yourself a gift. You reclaim your power. You show him, and more importantly yourself, that you're not afraid of the quiet. That you're not afraid to stand still and see who steps toward you instead of always being the one to bridge the gap. Because if someone goes quiet and you stay strong, you discover the truth of where you really stand. And with them, if he cares, he'll feel the emptiness and return with clarity. If he doesn't, then his silence has already spoken the words you've been too afraid to hear. And his silence is not rejection, it's revelation. It's pulling back the curtain on the story you've been telling yourself. It's stripping away the fantasy of what you wish this connection could be and showing you the reality of what it actually is. And that reality might sting, but it will also set you free. Because once you hear the message behind the silence, you stop waiting for something that's not coming. You stop pouring your love into a void. You stop holding on to someone who isn't holding on to you. But there's another truth here. Silence can also be attraction. Sometimes when someone goes quiet, it's not because they're gone. It's because they're thinking of you more than ever. It's because they feel your presence in their mind, in their day, in their heart, and they don't know how to handle it. They're silent because every time they think of reaching out, they realize they're falling deeper. And that terrifies them. Their silence is screaming your name because they can't escape you, even when they try. And that's why your reaction matters so much. If you chase the silence, you take away the space where desire grows. You take away the mystery, the curiosity, the longing. But if you allow the silence to exist, if you match it with your own strength, suddenly you become unforgettable. Because in that quiet, he realizes something. He's not the only one who can pull back. He's not the only one who can create space. And in that space, he begins to miss you. He begins to feel your absence. He begins to understand what it's like to not have your energy constantly there, filling the gaps, making it easy for him. And the silence then becomes a mirror. It reflects his true intentions, his true courage, his true desire. And it reflects your strength, your self-worth, your refusal to settle for less than clarity and consistency. It shows both of you what you're aid of. And the one who can hold the silence without breaking is the one who holds the power. And so when you're tempted to send that text, when you're tempted to call, when you're tempted to demand answers, remind yourself, silence is already giving you the answer. It may not be the answer you wanted, but it's the answer you needed. And when his silence screams your name, don't mistake that scream for love. Love doesn't hide in shadows. Love doesn't vanish when things get tough. Love doesn't make you doubt your place. Love shows up, love speaks, love reassures. And the real question is not whether his silence means he's thinking of you. The real question is whether you're willing to listen to what his silence is telling you and whether you're brave enough to act on it, because the longer you ignore the message, the louder it becomes. And one day you'll realize that his silence wasn't just about him, it was about you finding your own voice in the quiet. And when his silence screams your name, don't run to silence it. Don't rush to fill the space. Stand tall in it. Feel its weight. Let it show you who he is and remind you who you are. Because sometimes the loudest truth is found in the quietest moment. And if you listen closely, you'll realize his silence has given you all the clarity you need. And here's where most people miss the lesson. They see silence as punishment, as rejection, as abandonment, and they react with fear. But fear is the enemy of clarity. Fear drives you to over-explain, to over-give, to compromise your standards, just to get back a little bit of the certainty you crave. Fear pushes you to chase someone who has already stopped moving toward you. And in that chase, you lose yourself. You silence your own needs, your own standards, your own boundaries, just so you can drown out the sound of his silence. But what if you stopped running from it and started leaning into it? What if you looked at silence, not as a loss, but as a gift? And silence is a mirror that shows you how much noise you create in relationships, just to avoid being alone with yourself. It reveals how much you depend on constant reassurance, constant validation, constant presence in order to feel secure. It shows you where you've been outsourcing your worth to someone else's words and actions. And it invites you to reclaim that worth, to anchor it back in yourself. Because the truth is, the only silence you should fear is the silence you hold within when you ignore your intuition. His silence is not dangerous. Your silence, when you mute your own needs, is. And think about the moments in your life where you grew the most, where you discovered strength you didn't know you had. Those moments didn't come when everything was easy and clear. They came in the waiting. They came in the uncertainty. They came in the silence. That's where you learned patience, resilience, courage. That's where you realized you could stand on your own, even when someone else wasn't standing beside you. And now, in this moment, you're being given that same opportunity again. His silence is a test, not of his love, but of your strength. Will you crumble under it, or will you rise because of it? And every time you resist the urge to break the silence first, you build a muscle. You teach yourself that you don't have to rush in to fix what isn't yours to fix. You remind yourself that if someone wants to step up, they will. And if they don't, that's information you can use to protect your heart. The silence is not empty. It's full of answers. And the longer you can hold it, the clearer those answers become. And here's something powerful to remember. Attraction isn't built in constant communication. It's built in space. It's built in these. In moments when someone has to wonder about you, when they have to miss you, when they have to ask themselves what you're doing, who you're with, how you're feeling, That tension, that longing, that curiosity, it doesn't exist if you're always the one to fill the silence. By rushing in, you rob them of the chance to miss you. You rob them of the chance to feel your absence. You rob them of the chance to recognize your value. But when you match silence with silence, when you hold your ground with strength and grace, you create the very conditions that make someone realize what they stand to lose. And even if they don't come back, even if the silence remains, you win. Because you've proven to yourself that your value isn't tied to someone else's attention. You've proven that you can withstand discomfort, that you can sit with uncertainty, that you can let go of control and still be okay. That lesson is worth more than any relationship that could fade away. That lesson makes you unshakable, untouchable, unbreakable. And now let's be real. Silence hurts. It can feel like rejection, like neglect, like being erased. But pain is not always the enemy. Pain is a signal. Pain tells you where you've been giving too much, where you've been tolerating too little, where you've been accepting crumbs instead of demanding a feast. Pain is your body's way of saying, this isn't enough for me. I deserve more. And when you listen to that pain, instead of numbing it with chasing, you turn it into power. You stop settling for people who can't show up. You stop tolerating half-love. You stop investing in connections that drain you. And then what happens when you stop chasing silence? You begin to attract people who actually speak, people who show up, people who don't make you wonder where you stand, because you've raised your standard and silence no longer has power over you. You've decided that your voice, your needs, your presence matter too much to be drowned out. You've decided that anyone who cannot communicate, anyone who hides in silence, is not someone you will give your heart to. And that shift changes everything. You go from being someone who waits to be chosen to someone who chooses. You go from being someone who reacts to silence to someone who uses silence as a filter. And suddenly, you're not afraid of someone pulling away anymore. Because you know that if they do, it's only making room for someone better. Silence stops being a rejection and becomes redirection. But let's take it deeper. Sometimes his silence is not about you at all. Sometimes it's about his own fears, his own past, his own inability to communicate. Sometimes people go quiet because they're overwhelmed, because they don't know how to handle their feelings, because they've never learned how to express vulnerability. And while you can have empathy for that, you cannot let that become your excuse to accept less. You cannot let someone's silence become your prison. Empathy does not mean sacrifice. Compassion does not mean self-abandonment. You can understand someone's silence without surrendering your standards. And here's the paradox. When you stop fearing silence, you actually become better at love. Because you no longer cling, you no longer chase, you no longer beg for scraps. You bring a calm confidence to your relationships, one that says, I want you, but I don't need you to validate me. I choose you, but I am whole without you. I can love you, but I will not lose myself in your silence. That energy is magnetic. It draws people closer, not because you've manipulated them, but because you've shown them you're strong enough to stand on your own. And so when his silence screams your name, don't hear it as an invitation to run after him. Hear it as a wake-up call to yourself. Hear it as a reminder of your power, your worth, your voice. To teach you patience. Let it teach you self-control. Let it teach you the difference between someone who wants you and someone who is simply entertained by your presence until they don't feel like showing up. Let it teach you that you never have to beg for what is freely given by the right person. And silence is not the absence of love. Sometimes silence is the absence of courage. And courage is not something you can give to someone else. They either find it within themselves or they don't. But you can find yours right now. You can choose not to break the silence. You can choose to stand tall in it. You can choose to wait, not for him, but for the clarity the silence brings. Because clarity is always worth more than confusion. And if silence brings you clarity, then silence is a gift. And when you begin to see it that way, when you stop fighting against it, something incredible happens. You no longer feel powerless in the face of someone's withdrawal. You no longer crumble when attention fades. You no longer question your value every time someone goes quiet. Instead, you see it for what it is, a revelation. And in that revelation, you find freedom. And would you like me to continue expanding this into a third 1,000-word part? So the flow remains seamless and uninterrupted, carrying the same motivational intensity. And the freedom you find in that revelation is unlike anything you've felt before, because for the first time, you realize you don't have to fight for someone to choose you. You don't have to audition for love. You don't have to prove your worth in the silence of someone else's absence. You stand there unshaken and you see clearly. If someone is silent, it is their message, not your reflection. And you finally understand that the silence you've been terrified of is not the enemy. It is your teacher. And what it teaches you is patience. It teaches you that not every moment requires a response. Not every distance requires a bridge. Not every absence requires you to fill it with your presence. It teaches you to let things unfold naturally, to allow people to show you their intentions without you rushing to interpret them. And in that patience, you uncover a new power, the power of restraint. Because strength is not just in action. Strength is also in knowing when not to act. And silence also teaches you to listen more deeply, not just to others, but to yourself. When you are no longer scrambling to fill the void with noise, you begin to hear your own inner voice more clearly. You hear the quiet whispers of your intuition telling you whether this person is truly for you. You hear the echoes of your values reminding you what kind of love you deserve. You hear the sound of your own heartbeat reminding you that your life, your worth, your happiness does not depend on whether someone else steps forward. In the quiet, you hear the truth you've been avoiding all along. You are already enough, with or without them. And then once you embrace that truth, silence becomes your filter. You no longer see it as punishment, you see it as clarity. When someone goes quiet, you no longer rush to ask, what did I do wrong? Instead, you ask, what does this reveal about them? What does this reveal about what they're capable of giving? What does this reveal about whether they align with the kind of love I want? That subtle shift changes everything, because now silence doesn't leave you powerless, it gives you answers. And think about how many times in your life you've tolerated inconsistency because you couldn't handle silence. How many times you've accepted crumbs just so you wouldn't feel the emptiness of someone stepping back. How many times you've silenced your own needs because you were terrified of losing the person you were giving everything to. That pattern ends when you stop running from silence. Because when you can face silence without fear, you stop clinging to people who don't value you. You stop negotiating for love. You stop accepting less than you deserve. And then here's the beauty. When you stop filling the silence, when you stop chasing, when you allow the space to exist, you give someone the opportunity to step up. If they're truly invested, they'll feel the gap and close it. They'll realize what they stand to lose and make the effort to bridge the distance. If they don't, then the silence has already given you your answer. You don't have to beg, you don't have to chase, you don't have to explain. The silence spoke for you. And that is why silence is so powerful. It strips away illusions. It forces the truth to the surface. Words can be manipulated. Promises can be made and broken. Actions can be delayed. But silence cannot lie. Silence is raw. Silence is revealing. Silence shows you exactly where you stand without the disguise of sweet words or empty promises. And here's something else silence does. It builds desire. Distance creates longing. Space creates intrigue. When you're not always available, when you're not always rushing to close the gap, you allow someone to wonder about you. You give them the gift of curiosity. You let them sit in the absence of your energy and realize just how much it added to their life. That realization doesn't happen when you're always the one to break the silence. It only happens when you have the strength to hold it. But let's be honest, holding silence takes courage. It takes emotional strength to resist the urge to reach out, to fix, to demand, to control. It takes faith to believe that if something is meant for you, it won't be lost in the quiet. It takes self-respect to say, I will not be the one to carry this connection on my back. If it matters to them, they will show me. That is not arrogance, that is dignity. And dignity is what makes you magnetic. Dignity is what makes people respect you, even if they don't choose you. Dignity is what makes you powerful in the face of uncertainty. When you master silence, you master yourself. You become calm in the chaos, steady in the storm, grounded in uncertainty. You learn not to beg, not to chase, not to bargain with your worth. You learn to let others reveal themselves instead of exhausting yourself to interpret them. You learn to sit back, breathe, and allow the truth to surface. And when you operate from that place, you are no longer at the mercy of someone else's behavior. And this is the transformation silence offers you if you let it. It strips away the illusions you've built, the stories you've told yourself, the fantasies you've clung to. It forces you to confront reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. And though that reality may sting, it will never destroy you, because facing the truth will always be less damaging than clinging to a lie. Silence doesn't destroy relationships. It reveals the truth about them. It doesn't end love. It shows you whether love was truly there to begin with. And imagine how much peace you would gain if you stopped interpreting silence as a personal attack and started seeing it as an unveiling. Imagine how much power you would regain if you stopped rushing to fill every gap with effort and instead let the gap show you who is willing to cross it. Imagine how much energy you would save if you stopped giving explanations to people who are communicating through their lack of action. That is what embracing silence does. It gives you back your peace, your power, your energy. And the moment you reclaim those things, you rise to a different level of attraction. Because let's be clear, strength is attractive. Dignity is magnetic. People are drawn to those who don't panic in the face of uncertainty, who don't beg for validation, who don't crumble when tested. When you show that you can hold silence without breaking, you communicate something profound. You are secure. You are whole. You are unafraid of space. And that energy draws people closer because it creates an environment where love can exist without desperation. But it's not just about what others see in you. It's about what you see in yourself. When you hold silence with dignity, you feel your own strength in a way that no one can ever take away. You realize you don't need constant reassurance to know your value. You realize you can face the unknown without falling apart. You realize you can walk away from situations that don't serve you, not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself more. That kind of self-trust changes everything, and it changes how you move in relationships. No longer do you cling to mixed signals because you're no longer desperate for crumbs. No longer do you try to decode someone's every action because you've learned to let their silence speak for them. No longer do you lose sleep wondering what you did wrong because you know that silence says more about their capacity than your worth. You move with a calm confidence, and that confidence transforms not only your relationships but your life. And because when you stop being afraid of silence, you stop being afraid of endings. You stop being afraid of letting go. You stop being afraid of standing alone. And that freedom is everything. It allows you to raise your standards without fear. It allows you to demand clarity without guilt. It allows you to walk away from inconsistency without hesitation. Silence becomes not something that holds you hostage, but something that sets you free. And as you grow in that freedom, you begin to see the beauty in silence. You see that sometimes silence is not rejection, but reflection. Sometimes silence is not distance, but desire. Sometimes silence is not avoidance, but intensity. And by holding your ground, you give space for those truths to reveal themselves. You stop interrupting the process. You stop rescuing people from their own fears. You stop chasing after answers you already know. You wait, you watch, you listen. And in that stillness, everything you need to know unfolds. And this is why silence is not something to break, but something to respect. Respecting silence means respecting yourself. It means trusting that if someone wants to step forward, they will. It means believing that your worth is not diminished by someone else's withdrawal. It means refusing to trade your dignity for the illusion of closeness. It means knowing that the right person will never leave you stranded in silence. They will come forward, they will speak, they will act. And then when you finally internalize this, silence loses its power over you. It no longer controls you, manipulates you, or frightens you. It becomes a tool you use to see clearly, to filter out what doesn't serve you, to attract what does. And that is the point where you stop fearing silence and start commanding it. You stop waiting for others to break it and start letting it do the work for you. You stop seeing it as emptiness and start seeing it as revelation. And because in the end, silence is not about him at all. It's about you, your patience, your strength, your dignity, your self-worth. It's about the message you send to yourself when you decide not to panic, not to chase, not to compromise. It's about the person you become in the quiet, the resilience you build, the clarity you gain. His silence may scream your name, but it's your response that defines everything. And when your response is rooted in strength, there is nothing silence can take from you, only truths it can reveal to you